Okay, learner, welcome to a deep dive. That's well, it's a bit out there even for us, I think. I mean, we've covered some wild stuff,
Oh, yeah.
but today we're going deep into the Lacerta Files. And
Buckle up.
yeah, buckle up because it's a set of interviews supposedly with a being who says she's from an ancient reptilian race
Here on Earth.
here on Earth living among us, and it's yeah, it's going to stretch those boundaries of belief for sure.
Absolutely.
Your mission, if you're brave enough to continue listening, is to sort of sift through these really out there claims and see if maybe, just maybe, there's a kernel of something fascinating in
A
there.
little grain of truth, yeah. And maybe rethink some of our assumptions about, history and the universe while we're at it.
Exactly.
Big questions.
The big question. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, let's start with the source material, right? So we're
Okay.
talking about transcripts that were published online back in 2004 by a guy named Jimmy Bergman.
Yes.
And they present these interviews supposedly conducted in 1999 and 2000 with this being called Lacerta.
Lacerta.
Yeah, and she claims to be, well, a reptilian, being a member of this ancient race that's been living on Earth for millions of years. The interviewer is identified as Ole K.
Right.
He starts out, as you might expect, pretty skeptical, but he describes these encounters that involve telepathy, telekinesis,
Yeah.
things that are just way outside of our normal experience.
Yeah.
And the editor of the website mentions that they cleaned up the English a bit.
Yeah.
But the core message, the core intent of the interviews, they say, is intact.
Okay, so let's dive into the star of the show here, Lacerta. Right, so she says she's not an extraterrestrial visitor. She's not from another planet. She's actually a native Terran, as she calls it.
Right, a local.
A local. She's been here for millions of years. Her species has, and here's where it gets really interesting. She suggests that they're even mentioned in our own religious texts, like the Christian Bible. You know, that whole evil serpent thing. She's not too happy about that portrayal.
Well, it is interesting how often these alternative narratives try to kind of reinterpret those existing stories, those myths and legends, through a new lens, right?
Yeah.
So by connecting her species to the biblical serpent, it's almost like she's trying to embed them within human history and human understanding, even though it's obviously a very controversial way to do it.
It is. It's definitely provocative.
It makes you think about how these ancient symbols and stories could be viewed from completely different perspectives.
For sure, for sure. And get this, learner, her actual name, we can't even pronounce it.
What?
It's a series of sounds that our human vocal cords just can't quite manage. It's sibilant and guttural, and she says Lacerta is just, the name she's using for us simple humans, and she even gives her age in their system. It's 57,653 cycles, which she equates to about 28 human years.
Wow. So they have a very different concept of time then.
It seems so, yeah. And her purpose, she says she's here studying human social behavior.
Dedicated researcher.
Dedicated is an understatement, right? So, okay, let's move on to a topic that I think is always going to get people talking UFOs.
Always.
Lacerta claims that while, yes, some UFO sightings are their craft, a lot of them are actually misinterpretations. Natural phenomena, weird atmospheric stuff, or they belong to, human military projects, things we've cooked up ourselves, or even other alien species entirely.
So she's not saying that all UFOs are hers.
No.
Which is interesting. It kind of lends a bit of credibility maybe by acknowledging that, it's not just one thing.
Right, it's a complex phenomenon.
Exactly.
She even gives a very specific description of a typical Lacerta craft. She says they're metallic, bright gray, cigar-shaped, and the size can vary quite a bit.
Oh, how big are we talking?
She says anywhere from 20 to 260 meters long.
Wow, that's a big range.
It is a huge range, yeah, and apparently they make this deep humming sound and have 5 bright red lights.
Okay, so if you see something like that, learner, let us know.
Exactly, report back. But she says the disc-shaped UFOs, those are more likely to be other aliens, and the triangular ones.
Yeah, what about those?
Those are mostly, she says, human military using technology that they've acquired somehow.
Reverse engineered, perhaps?
Who knows? But she does say that if you're really looking for a Lacerta craft, your best bet is the Arctic, the Antarctic, or the mountains of Inner Asia.
Interesting. So those remote areas far from prying eyes.
Exactly. Now let's talk symbols. Because Lacerta mentions 2 main symbols associated with her species. The older one is a blue serpent with 4 white wings on a black background.
Okay, I'm picturing that.
And the colors, she says, have deep religious significance for them. But the more common symbol today is a dragon inside a circle with 7 white stars around it.
Ooh, symbols. I mean, they're so powerful, right?
Yeah.
They really tell you a lot about a culture. So that shift from a serpent to a dragon that's pretty significant could mean a change in how they see themselves over their long history and the colors, the meanings behind them. That's something I'd love to dig into deeper.
Yeah, if only we could, sit down with Lacerta over a cup of tea and
Mm.
really get into it. But those seven stars, she says they're not talking about constellations like we know them. They actually represent seven former colonies that they had within our solar system.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you heard that right. So the moon, Mars, Venus, and then four moons of Jupiter and Saturn. But she does note that two of these colonies are abandoned now, so it's currently five active ones. And the dragon in the circle that represents Earth itself. So it's like their family crest, but on a galactic scale.
Wow, I mean, that's a pretty big claim, right?
Yeah.
Ancient colonies all over our solar system really expands the scope of their influence and makes you wonder about, the nature of these settlements, how long they lasted.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling for sure. All right. Learner, ready for a biology lesson because we don't have any pictures, unfortunately, but we do have Lacerta's very detailed description of what she looks like. So picture this humanoid form, but with green beige skin and brown spots all over.
Okay, green beige skin and spots. I'm trying to visualize this.
And she says females like herself, they have more spots, especially on their lower body and face. And their eyes are a little bit larger than ours with vertical slit pupils.
Ooh, like a reptile.
Exactly. And green irises that are darker in males. They have smaller round ears. But with these functioning lids, imagine that. And a more pointed nose with a slight ability to sense temperature.
So they can kind of feel the heat with their nose. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pale brown lips, strong sharp teeth, hair only on the head, thicker greenish brown, and grows very slowly. What jumps out at you so far?
Well, I mean, it's that mix of humanoid and reptilian features, right? You've got the slit pupils and the skin texture that screams reptile, but the overall shape is still humanoid, so it makes you think that maybe interaction is possible, even mimicry, like you mentioned before.
Right, right. And here's where the details get even wilder. She describes scale-like structures on their upper legs and arms, longer, thinner fingers than ours, no fingerprints, but they have those brown spots and get this small, sharp horns on the back of their middle
The
finger.
stars on their face?
Yeah, isn't that crazy? And gray fingernails, longer pointed, and even more so in males. And then there's this hard, bony, segmented plate that runs down their back over their spine. It's super sensitive to touch, and she says it's vital for regulating their body temperature. They basically sunbathe with it.
So they're cold-blooded like typical reptiles.
Exactly. And one more thing, no navel.
No belly button.
Nope, because of their very unique reproductive process.
Okay, now I'm really curious about that one.
We'll get there, I promise. But first, let's talk about how this biology impacts their daily life. So think about clothing.
Mm.
Lacerta says she only wears human clothes when she absolutely has to blend in, and it's not comfortable for her at all, those tight jeans and restrictive tops.
Yeah, I can imagine those back plates wouldn't appreciate that too much.
Not at all. So in their underground homes or their special sunbathing areas, they're usually just naked, but when they need to be a little more presentable in their underground communities, they wear loose, soft clothing made from light materials. And men and women often wear similar styles, just in different colors.
So it's more about practicality and comfort than fashion statements.
Exactly. Now their social structure, it's not the nuclear family we're used to. They live in these large families of 40 to 70 individuals, and it's not strictly based on genetics. It's more about community shared life, and they have unique names, but with a middle part that shows their family affiliations. So you might be related to some in your family, but the bond goes beyond blood.
That's interesting. So it's like a blend of family and community, almost like a tribe.
Exactly, a very tight-knit tribe. And now for that birth process you've been waiting for.
Okay, lay it on me.
So she describes laying eggs, but here's the twist. The embryo actually develops inside the mother in this protein-rich liquid.
So it's like a combination of egg laying and live birth.
It is a very unique blend, and then the egg is expelled covered in this slimy protein substance, and the baby hatches within minutes using those finger horns to break out.
Wow, those horns are multi-purpose.
Yeah, they are very handy. Newborns are tiny, around 30 to 35 centimeters, but they grow to an average height of 1.60 to 1.80 meters. So it's fascinating how they blend these reptilian traits with what we think of as mammalian development.
It definitely makes you rethink the categories we put living things into.
It does. Now, physiologically, they're reptilians, so their body temperature is around 30 to 33 degrees Celsius, and it's influenced by the environment. They love soaking up heat, whether it's from the sun or artificial sources in their underground cities because it activates enzymes and hormones, and they love warm water or other liquids to regulate their temperature.
Makes sense for cold-blooded creatures.
Their diet's pretty diverse, too. They eat a mix of stuff. We do fruits, vegetables, fungi that grow underground. But she does emphasize that flesh is essential for them.
So they're omnivores with a carnivorous leaning.
Exactly. And here's another interesting tidbit. They can digest some substances that would be toxic to us humans.
Probably an adaptation to their underground environment, I guess.
Yes, makes sense. Okay, learner, are you ready for a history lesson that's going to completely blow your mind? Because according to Lacerta, her species' ancestors were a dinosaur race.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And that mass extinction event 65 million years ago, the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, she says it wasn't an asteroid.
What?
It was a global war. A war between humanoid aliens from the Procyon system and reptilian aliens, not her direct ancestors, though.
Okay, so an interstellar war.
An interstellar war, and it involved a devastating fusion bomb detonated in what's now Central America, the fallout, the radiation, a nuclear winter. That's what caused the mass extinction.
Wow, that's a pretty radical departure from what we're taught in school.
It is, but wait, there's more her ancestors. She says they were a smaller, more advanced group of dinosaurs that managed to survive this cataclysm, and over the next 30 million years, they evolved, developed intelligence, bipedalism, bigger brains, grasping hands, and then around 10 million years ago, they supposedly underwent a genetic refinement process.
So they were kind of given a boost.
Exactly. Meanwhile, she claims human ancestors, those little primates were evolving much slower without outside help. She says we'd still be pretty primitive.
So we were lagging behind.
Way behind. And then enter the Illojim, these tall, blonde, light-skinned humanoids from the Aldebaran star system.
Okay, who were they?
They showed up about 1.5 million years ago, and they weren't interested in minerals or anything like that. They were interested in us, the developing humanoids.
Us?
Yes, and Lacerta claims they sped up our evolution significantly, maybe, to use us as a workforce in the future, which her species wasn't too thrilled about.
I can imagine.
Yeah, leading to some conflicts between them. And she even suggests that some of these conflicts are reflected in ancient human texts, just maybe in a distorted or symbolic way.
So like those ancient astronaut theories.
Exactly. And get this, she says there have been 7 human civilizations, our current one being the 7th, starting around 8,500 years ago.
Yeah.
7. And she claims the previous ones were far more advanced technologically. For example, she says the Egyptian pyramids were built by the 5th civilization around 75,000 years ago, and the Bimini Road by the 6th around 16,000 years ago.
That's a very different timeline than what mainstream archaeology tells us.
Completely different. And the Illojim, she says, they left Earth about 4,943 years ago, leaving us to our own devices, or so we think.
It's a pretty wild story.
It is. So how does Lacerta's species have this detailed knowledge of the past?
Well, she mentions a 65-million-year-old memory plate that their researchers found in North America about 16,000 years ago. It was made of this unknown magnetic material and contained encoded information on a smaller crystal plate created by the Procyon humanoids, those survivors of the ancient war.
Like an ancient hard drive.
Exactly. And they also gather information from skeletal remains and their own genetic analysis.
So they have their own version of archaeology and paleontology. Exactly. And you might be wondering, if they've been here for so long, why haven't we found more evidence of them, their fossils? Well, Lacerta says we just haven't recognized them. She claims our scientists have misidentified their bones as belonging to primitive dinosaurs like those iguanodon hands. She even mentions a nearly complete skeleton that was confiscated by the U.S. government.
A cover-up.
Maybe. And of course, living almost entirely underground wouldn't leave many traces for us to find on the surface.
That makes sense.
So let's talk about their underground civilization. It's not a hollow Earth with an inner sun. Like some theories suggest, it's a network of vast cave systems, 2,000 to 8,000 meters deep, with advanced cities and interconnected colonies beneath the Arctic, Antarctic, Inner Asia, North America, Australia.
So a whole hidden world beneath our feet?
Exactly. And they don't rely on natural sunlight down there. They have artificial sunlight generated by advanced technology and specific UV light areas to keep their bodies warm.
So they basically recreated their ideal environment underground.
Exactly. And their surface entrances are incredibly well hidden. They often look like ordinary cave walls with secret metal doors that lead to technical facilities with ventilation and elevators. She really advises against trying to find them, though.
Probably for the best.
Probably. And now for the really weird part, Lacerta says they can use telepathy to project an image into human minds, basically making us see them as other humans. She uses the example of an attractive brown-haired woman.
So they can make us see what they want us to see.
Exactly. And she says there's this on-off switch in our consciousness put there by the Illojim that they can manipulate. But cameras, she says, cameras capture their true reptilian form because this mental influence doesn't work on technology.
So that's why we haven't seen any clear photos of them?
Right, so can they control our thoughts or actions directly? Well, she
Hmm.
says giving commands like serve us is possible, but it takes a lot of effort, and they generally don't do it because they don't consider us their enemies for the most part. The UFOs, she says, are also hidden using this mental manipulation, making us see nothing or just normal aircraft. And even those secret tunnel entrances are often hidden in plain sight through these projections.
So our perception of reality is basically being manipulated.
To some extent, maybe it's a disturbing thought for sure. Now, who else is out there, according to Lacerta? Well, she says there are 14 alien species that her people know about currently, 11 from our universe, 2 from another bubble reality, and 1 incredibly advanced species from a completely different plane of
Yeah,
existence.
okay, now that's getting really out there.
I know, right? Most of them are apparently just observing humanity, but 3 are considered hostile, and one of these has even made deals with human governments in exchange for resources. She mentions a long-standing Cold War between 2 of these hostile races, with a third one seemingly winning, and she predicts a possible hot war involving humans in the next 10 to 20
A
years.
war with aliens.
It's a possibility, she says. There were even recent rumors of a 15th species showing up.
So it's a crowded galaxy.
It seems so, and what do these hostile aliens want? Well, mostly raw materials like copper, hydrogen from our water components from our atmosphere, but 2 of them are also interested in human biological material, tissue, and blood
What for?
to try and fix their own genetic problems through crossbreeding. That's what she suggests is behind a lot of the alien abduction stories.
So we're basically lab rats.
In their eyes, maybe, and those wildly different descriptions of aliens reported during abductions, she says that's because of their advanced mental abilities. They can appear however they want in our minds and memories. So protecting yourself from this mental influence is really tough. She says awareness, concentration, staying awake, keeping your eyes open might offer some resistance against weaker species, but against the more advanced ones, it's probably useless.
So we're pretty vulnerable then.
It seems so, and that super advanced species from a different plane of existence, she mentioned, they've been around for billions of years, she says, and while they're not a threat, their interests in Earth are on a completely different level beyond anything we can understand.
So they're playing a different game altogether.
Exactly. Now, if this future war does happen, what will it look like? Well, Lacerta says it could involve disrupting our social systems, using advanced weapons to trigger natural disasters, maybe even manipulating our weather with those copper fusion fields. A direct, full-scale invasion, she says, is less likely, while we still have some defenses, but the exact timing and nature of this conflict is uncertain.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. She also did a second interview a few months later in April 2000, and she addressed some of the negative reactions to the first interview, particularly the religious and hateful responses. She said they weren't unexpected and blamed it on that Illojim programming. She also reiterated that there are no inherently evil species, just individuals with good and bad intentions within any race.
A more nuanced view.
Definitely. And then she got into some really complex physics. She talked about our physical world having this illusory nature within a larger sphere of influence and 5 states of matter, with plasma being key for anti-gravity technology. It involves something she called the observer-dependent reflective behavior of a unified force. She said their UFOs work by manipulating gravity using plasma fields. But human attempts to copy this tech have been plagued by instability and dangerous radiation.
Observer dependent. That sounds like quantum physics almost.
No. It does, right. And she talked about copper fusion technology shifting copper's field spectrum to a higher plasma-like state, creating a force field for levitation, camouflage, limited time manipulation, even quantum tunneling effects. She also touched on paranormal abilities, grounding them in this sphere of influence where matter has energy equivalents, and she described a paralayer between physical matter and morphogenetic fields responsible for PSI phenomena that interacts with both mind and matter.
So she's tying together all these seemingly disparate things.
A unified theory of everything, almost.
Exactly.
And she says consciousness itself is an energy matrix within the sphere of influence. Powerful minds can directly interact with that paralayer. She even talked about the pituitary gland generating frequencies to influence it, and as a demonstration, she supposedly used telekinesis to move a pencil.
Wow, so she's saying there's a biological basis for these abilities.
Yeah. It seems so. And remember that mimicry ability. She said it takes a lot of practice and understanding of human minds because of that implanted switch. She also revealed that governments have recovered UFO materials from crashes. She specifically mentioned Roswell in 1947 and said there were actually two ships that went down because Earth's magnetic field messed with their propulsion systems. And she said there were even earlier crashes in 1946.
So Roswell wasn't a one-off.
Apparently not, and she said the aliens involved in those crashes, the ones with the disc-shaped craft, used a fusion propulsion system that was sensitive to Earth's magnetic field fluctuations.
Interesting. So it wasn't a deliberate crash.
It seems like it was a technical malfunction. She also claimed that unfriendly alien species made contact with human governments in the 1960s, offering bogus technology in exchange for resources and access, which led to a lot of deception and broken promises, even a confrontation in the late 70s or early 80s. She says this species is now actively preparing to take over Earth's resources and human DNA.
So we're in danger.
According to her, yes, the more advanced alien species. She says they just see us as lab animals and probably won't get involved in any conflicts. Lacerta did say that her species has shared information with certain people in human governments, but they plan to mostly stay out of any future wars.
So they're not going to be our saviors.
It seems not. And about those UFO photos, she dismissed most of them as fakes or misidentified stuff, but she pointed to one photo from France in 1974 as potentially genuine, maybe showing a craft from a species that's been visiting Earth for about 35 years and exhibiting some kind of gravity-bending light manipulation. And she said that famous photo from Belgium in 1990 was likely a human military craft using early alien tech. She pointed out the field distortions, but also said the design looked unstable.
So she's analyzing these cases with an insider's perspective.
Exactly. And finally, she talked about her first contact with the interviewer, Ole K, back in 1998 in Sweden. She was studying environmental pollution at the time. She used her mimicry abilities, had several meetings with him, and then revealed her true form during the fourth encounter. She described him as open-minded and kind of isolated. She says she now has permission, a quasi-immune status to talk about this stuff publicly, but general contact with your species is still avoided. They stick to remote areas and use their mimicry. She emphasized that finding their underground entrances is extremely difficult and dangerous. She even described her own home, a huge dome-shaped cavern about 2.5 kilometers across and 220 meters high, located 4,300 meters underground in an eastern region with artificial light sources, connections to other colonies, and a surface exit near a hidden rocky mountain face. It's a very detailed picture of a hidden world.
Wow, so much information.
I know it's overwhelming, right? So, learner, let's recap. We've gone deep into the Lacerta Files. This wild story of ancient reptilian origins, alien manipulation underground cities, and the threat of future war. It's a narrative that challenges everything we think we know about our history and our reality.
It really makes you question everything, doesn't it?
It does. So here's a final thought to ponder. If even a tiny part of Lacerta's story is true, how would it change our understanding of history, our place in the universe, the nature of reality itself? What questions does this deep dive leave you with about the world, both the seen and the unseen?
I think it reminds us that there are always alternative perspectives out there and that what we consider knowledge is constantly evolving.
Exactly.
Wow.
So keep questioning, keep learning, and keep that mind open to possibilities until next time. Learner, happy exploring.
Stay curious.
Always.
Bye.
Bye.